Today we're going to look at a format that I don't particularly like. It's called DVCPRO from Panasonic. Actually, there's nothing at all wrong with the DVCPRO format. The reason I don't like it is that I found the machines themselves to be unreliable, and we can have a quick look at some of the problems later. Firstly though, I wanted to show you these two tapes. Both contain digital recordings. The quality is very similar because they both record in the DV codec. There's a subtle difference to the colour subsampling, but let's not worry about that too much right now. They are virtually the same size, and yet they're completely incompatible. What's going on here? Is this another VHS beta war between Sony on the one hand and Panasonic on the other? Well, yes and no. It is true that this is a Sony format and this is a Panasonic one, but they were not really in competition with each other. Digital 8 was primarily a domestic format built on Video 8 and High 8, with which it is partly interchangeable. DVCPRO was primarily a professional format built on DV and Mini DV, with which it was partly interchangeable. This Mini DV tape is the one most people are familiar with, but there is also a full-size DV tape with longer recording time. DVCPRO came in 3 sizes, one of which is just the same size as a DV tape. In fact, they are to some extent interchangeable. DVCPRO offered better reliability than normal DV and better editing facilities, precisely what professionals wanted. But it gets messier because Sony countered with DV Cam using that same size tape and recording in much the same way as DVCPRO. DV Cam was a huge success. It was reliable, affordable, and the tapes could be played in some domestic machines. You could also record DV Cam recordings using the small Mini DV size tapes. From what I can tell, DVCPRO didn't really do that well. So Panasonic came back with DVCPRO 50. This was a higher performance variant, giving results very similar to Sony's very reliable digital Betacam, which is almost universal in TV studios. Well, digital Betacam pretty much won that war, I believe. Panasonic hit back again with DVCPRO HD, competing with Sony's equally reliable HD Cam. You can imagine where that got them. I have equipment for all 3 DVCPRO variants here, but the road has been a rocky one. It didn't start off well when I bought an JD230 or a similar machine from a professional seller on eBay. It didn't work very well at all and I had to send it back. Not a very good start. Then I bought this one, which worked for a time. Let's try it now. Here we have a Panasonic JD230, which is the first DVCPRO machine I ever owned that worked. I bought this on eBay, and when it arrived I immediately found a design flaw in it. These feet here are not properly supported. They're on thin metal brackets, and in transport they'd been pushed. These feet were bent inwards to the extent that at least one of them was almost touching the circuit board, which of course would have been instant destruction for the machine. So design flaw number 1 there. These machines only work with the first version of DVCPRO, so it's the DV codec, not the higher bitrate format. Let's power it up, see what we get. You can see the display on there. Everything looks promising enough. Let's pop a tape in. It goes in, has a think about it while it decides what size to set the spools at. Well, it looks promising. Press play. It seems to be working. E62. Oh dear, let's look that one up. Can we eject the tape from this E62 position? No. Have to switch off and on. Okay, let's eject from there. That doesn't feel right. There's tape hanging out of this cassette. This is not a good position to be in. Let's power it down, take the lid off and get the tape out before it gets any more damage than it needs to be. Looking at the back here, you'll see this machine has no digital output connectors at all. It's all analog, which kind of defeats the whole point of having a digital video recorder. So if you were to dub from this to another machine, you'd have to go via analog connections. On some of these machines there was an option for adding a Firewire port, but it didn't comply with the DV standard that a DV cam deck would, so your connection options were still limited. Right, let's take the lid off this one. I can see that the tape has become a little entangled, so I'm going to have to ease that out carefully. So that's not done the tape any good at all. Okay, so there's some tape damage, but it's not the end of the world. It's only a test tape that will still function to a point. Looking at the machine, what always strikes me as odd is, you know, fairly large machines, an absolutely tiny little video head here. But of course it has to be the same size as a mini DV video head because it's to some extent backwards compatible with mini DV. So the problem there would appear to be some supply or take up spool issue if it wasn't managing to get the tape back into the cassette properly. Shall we watch the fault condition at the risk of damaging my tape some more? Ah, look, lace-up's not happening properly. Did you see that? Oh! It's laced up now, making a dreadful noise though. I would say that cassette's not fully down. I reckon the cassette's not fully down in its... No, it's not. You see, I can feel that. The cassette's not fully down. So that's why it wasn't doing the lace up. Well, maybe because it was on its side. Let's see if it's a little happier now. The tape is fully down. I think we'll... should we try to play? No, I don't think it'll let us. It's power down, power up, eject, and put the tape back in. Well, that went okay, apart from the fact that these stop the tape coming out cleanly. The tape's not fully down. That's the problem here. Now it's working. So there's a problem with the loading. It's actually working. Okay, let's eject the tape. It's unlaced okay. Ejected properly. So why would the cassette not go fully down? I have a couple of theories. Either it's a problem with the cassette carriage, but I suspect it might actually be a problem with the reels where they change size for the two different types of tape, because this is a larger tape size and I have a smaller tape. So what I'm going to do here is cycle the machine between the two sizes of tapes a few times to see if we can see a problem with the where the mechanism changes the spool spacing. And eject, immediate eject, please. Good. Larger size, and an immediate eject. Smaller size. Do this a few times, and that exercises the mechanism that changes spool size. Right, let's see if that's got us anywhere. No, it's not sat down properly. Or is it? No, it's not. It did eventually go down properly when I gave it a nudge. And there it is working. Okay. Is it a problem with the spools, or is it the front loader? Let's put the smaller size tape in, see if that gets fully loaded down. I think that was fully down from the start. The small size was fully down. It keeps needing a push on the large size, and it's this side always, not that. Let's see how that goes. No, it's still not down properly. Still not down properly. Something wrong here. Maybe it is the cassette carriage. I want to show this in a little detail here. I'm going to put the tape in, and I want to see the difference between the way the left and right hand sides of the cassette carriage seem to function on this defective machine. So pop the tape in, and I'm going to switch it off as soon as the tape's gone in. Right. And now you might just about be able to see something which is indicative of the fault we have on this machine. On the left hand side of the cassette carriage you can see this mechanism here. There's a gap between the teeth and the part of the mechanism here that pushes the cassette down. There's a small gap there and it's spring loaded. You may just about be able to make out there's a black spring, round spring in here, and this is normal for most cassette carriages of this general type. So there should be spring loaded tension pushing the tape down to hold it in place. So you can see a gap here between the part that's pushed by the spring and the part that's driven along the slider. Now let's look at the right hand side, same mechanism. And there is no gap here between the teeth of the gear and the part that's supposed to be pushed by the spring. And I can actually push it a bit further with my screwdriver and the cassette will sit down fully. Right, now it would work. So this spring is supposed to be pushing there and it's not doing a very good job, and I can actually push against that spring with my screwdriver and it really isn't applying terribly much pressure. This spring here, which you can maybe just about see, this black piece here is supposed to be pushing on there and it's not pushing with enough force. On the left hand side, the same spring here is pushing with so much force I can barely push it back with a screwdriver at all. So that is causing this cassette not to sit down properly. Once I've pushed it down with that, just with the screwdriver there, pushed it down, it's fine and the machine will work. And I'll demonstrate that. Just going over a bit of a tube tape, and the deck is running fine. So it's all about the right hand side of this cassette carriage not going down with enough force. Now I don't know what the cause is yet, and that's going to be my task to solve. But at least I've managed to work out where the fault lies on this video recorder. The next DVCPRO machine I bought was this JD230, which worked fine when I first used it, but started giving me problems within a few weeks. Here you can see the servo locked LED, which is just above the play button, is flickering. So the capstan and or head servos are not stable. The resulting images are inevitably a complete mess. The surface mount electrolytic capacitors used in these machines are prone to failure. On the head amplifier boards it was clear that all the capacitors had been changed before, and the ones I tested were all perfect. In this case I suspect failure of the capacitors on the servo board, which is on the far left of the machine. The two rearmost of these three LEDs should be lit when the servos are locked, but they're all over the place, as is the servo indicator on the front of the machine. So let's remove the servo PCB and take this into the workshop and look for bad capacitors. This 47 microfarad capacitor still has about the right capacitance, but the effective series resistance is getting a bit high. I'm sure this is not the cause of the problems, but I will change this one now. Let's start with some flux. Lewis Rossman loves this stuff. Now I will be using 2 soldering irons to heat both ends of the capacitor at once. After a bit of time and effort, we can remove the capacitor. I'll put that to one side and test it again in a moment. Next, I like to clean the PCB with some isopropyl alcohol. Then I will reflow the solder on the PCB, ready to accept a new capacitor. I use quality capacitors bought from a trustworthy supplier, not some cheap Chinese imports from eBay. The new capacitor in this case happens to be smaller than the original, so that makes installation a little easier. One pad soldered. Well, good enough for now anyway. Then the other side. Actually, I'll take this away from the camera which is in my way to resolder both pads a bit better. Then a retest with the capacitance meter ensures that the new component is in good condition and nothing is shorted out. I plan on adding a foot switch remote control feature to this capacitance meter at some point. Next, I will retest the capacitor that came out. I was expecting this. The ESR value has fallen due to the heat of being desoldered. Here I have quite a collection of capacitors that I've removed previously from this board. So let's test a few. Here's a 33 microfarad capacitor, which I replaced earlier. Again, the capacitance on this is not too far out, but the ESR was very high. I've also found that some values tend to be worse than others on this board. These 22 microfarad capacitors were nearly all terrible, like this one. Having changed many of the capacitors on this board, the machine now works okay, provided it has been left powered up for a few minutes before playing a tape. That's not ideal, and I will eventually replace all the capacitors on this board, plus check the power supply, to hopefully get the machine to be reliable from a cold power on. Here's another one I bought on eBay. It's an JD230. I've already taken the cabinet work off so that I can clean the heads. It's in pretty poor shape. A lot of the metal here looks quite rusty. Let's see what it does. Well, mechanically it seems quite good. So far so good, in fact. Let's press play. Oh. So, for just a moment it seemed to work. Should we try that again? Then E01 and then E00. So, those errors we will look up, but I think they mean words to the effect either no output from the heads or unlocked servos, or both. Clearly there's an output from the heads from somewhere, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to read those frames. Now I've cleaned the heads. I don't believe that there's a clogged head. So either the heads are completely shot, or more likely this one's got capacitor trouble too. So I'd have to take out the boards from the back, along the back here, and go through all those capacitors. It's a big job for a machine that only plays the first version of DVCPRO tapes. It's not particularly valuable. I suspect this one may not be worth fixing.
I can help you fix that. Permanently.
No thank you, boys.
Aww.
Here we have my best DVCPRO deck. It's an AJ HD1700, which is fully working, albeit the small display is a little bit dim around the edges and one of the buttons has some cosmetic damage. This one also takes the quite rare extra large size DVCPRO tapes, With an adapter, it can also play mini DV tapes, meaning it can play no less than 4 different tape sizes. It will also play DV cam format recordings, although alas not high definition HDV format ones.
One it too.
Press the triangle button, Max. That's it. Who's on the telly, Max?
In Peppa Pig.
It's Peppa Pig.
At the crown.
Yes.
Eat your cake. It's delicious cake.
So there we have my experiences with DVCPRO. It's an excellent format, but the machines don't necessarily seem to be the very best. I would suggest that Panasonic failed to learn from an earlier format called M2, which tried and generally failed to compete with Sony's Betacam SP. The Panasonic machines were unwieldy and unreliable, and the Sony ones were robust and hugely popular. So where Panasonic may have been more successful with VHS compared to Sony's Beta in the domestic market, Sony had the professional equipment market largely sewn up for decades. Now that everyone's gone tapeless, the professional market is probably more competitive since no one is so tied up to formats anymore. I hope this look at DVCPRO has been interesting. Please do share, like, and above all subscribe, so I'll do more YouTube videos on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now.
Push. Push. No, 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 no.